Hello, Wirex communities. So I'm currently at King's Cross with Jeff, just catching him before his flight off to other beautiful parts of Europe, and we're here going to discuss and explore certain areas about Jeff's history, and you know, he's the dollar vigilante, the guy. I've been following him personally for a few years, so this is a bit like a dream for me. So I'm very happy to be having this interview. So the first things first, you describe yourself as the dollar vigilante. What does that sort of mean to you, and you know, why did you choose that name?
Well, the name came from the old bond vigilantes, which were around in the 1970s, and there's people like George Soros back then when he was more of a good guy, not a bad guy like today. And in those days, in order to keep the central banks in check from inflating the currency too much and from governments going into too much debt, people who were called bond vigilantes would come and sell all the bonds to force the banks and force the government to stop going into so much debt and stop inflating the currency so much. So but now we live in an age where they can print up as much money as they want, and they essentially control all the markets. And so you really can't sell the bonds anymore to keep them in check, because they can buy as much as you want to sell, because they can just print up as much money as they want, and they control everything. So I was thinking about that when I wanted to start a new website and financial newsletter called The Dollar Vigilante Now. But I didn't have the name at that moment in time, and I wanted to help people to survive and prosper during and after the dollar collapse, which I expect will happen in the next few years. And when I actually heard the term bond vigilante on the radio, and I thought to myself, man, you know, it's too bad we don't have bond vigilantes anymore, but it's not really that possible because they control all the markets. And I said, what we really need today are dollar vigilantes. And as soon as I thought that, I went, that's the name I've been looking for, and I've been using that name ever since.
No, I mean, I completely empathize with that 100%. You know, after the credit crisis in 2008, we had, homelessness increased by 3 million American households, and the suicide rate increased fourfold. So nobody's held accountable. People have died, people have lost their homes, and there is no accountability within the space. Where you know, more people are sent to jail for petty crimes like, you know, shoplifting and so forth, than people have actually caused real harm to the community. And I mean, you know, with regards to sort of penny stocks, and which I was also a big fan of in the past, and you were a penny stock advisor in the past, is that correct?
I started Canada's largest financial website called stockhouse.com, and it's still the largest financial website in Canada today. And it had a lot of small stocks on it, because back in those days there was something called the Vancouver Stock Exchange in Canada, and that was well known as sort of like the world market for what you would call penny stocks. So I was involved in helping people get more information on those in the past. Yeah,
I mean, it's a huge industry. Like it's ginormous. It's enormous. You know, why did you sell in the end? Why did you sell the business? And you know,
well, it's kind of funny because the company grew. We were in 8 countries around the world. We were here in England as well. We had 250 staff working for us. We had a market capitalization of $240 million US at the peak in the year 2000, and then the tech bubble collapsed, and within a year or two, it was almost worthless. So I ended up selling it for just a few $1 million, really. And that's actually what led me to doing what I am today, because the first book that someone gave to me after that all happened was The Creature from Jekyll Island by George Griffin. And as I was reading it, I was like, why didn't anyone tell me that's how central banking works, and that's how all these booms and busts are created, and how you can actually see how that all happens? If I would have known that information in the past, I would have known that the tech bubble was a bubble, and I would have known it was going to collapse, and I wouldn't have I would have at least sold my company earlier or done something differently. So that actually led me to looking into Austrian economics and looking into liberty a lot, and things like anarcho-capitalism and things like that, and that's what led me to do what I am today. So it's kind of funny that sort of, I got burnt so bad by the central banks creating these bubbles that I decided to start up a website and financial newsletter that's helping to try to get rid of central banks.
No, of course, and I mean, I'm in the space for the same reason as well, and I you know, I'm disgusted almost by the stats and figures, and you know, the nefariousness of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 and how it was enacted by Woodrow Wilson when all the Senate was at home celebrating Christmas. You know, it's criminal. It's fraud on.
It was a banker takeover of the U.S. and even Woodrow Wilson said that. He said he felt bad afterwards because he essentially sold out the country to the banksters, and still to this day, it is truly the bankers that control the country.
Yeah, you know, they control the rate of inflation, they control the interest rates, and it's debt slavery in essence. Mm-hmm. It's debt slavery. They have the government in debt chains and the whole population, mm-hmm. and it's crazy. It's crazy to know. I mean, it's crazy to see firsthand. So, I mean, you know, Pavel and Dmitry, the founders of Wirex, are extremely fond of you. And so, how long have you known them? How did you kind of foster that relationship?
I actually don't remember exactly how I knew them, but when I first found out about Wirex, which used to be called eCoin, I believe, back in the day, I was super excited. It was the first Bitcoin card that I had heard of, and or at least one of the first. I think there was one before that, and so I contacted them right away, and I got the card, and I started using it, and I was like, this is amazing. And then I was in London here a year or two ago, and I said, let's meet up, and we met up, and I actually interviewed them. So that's how I've known them, and still am a Wirex customer today as well.
Excellent. And I mean, so what does Wirex mean to you? How does it empower you, and how do you use it?
Oh, well, I use it so much. I'm a huge Bitcoin advocate, a huge cryptocurrency advocate. I still do have things like US dollars and pounds and all those sort of things, but I try to get rid of them as fast as possible. But I hate banks. They're getting so bad to deal with. You have to give them so much information. They constantly are freezing your account or this or that, and they want more. They basically want to know everything about you. They put so many restrictions, and I believe it's going to get worse and worse. And all these banks are highly leveraged, and most of them will collapse in the next financial crisis, which will be coming any time now. We're talking days or weeks or months, not years, and definitely not decades. So it's going to happen soon. So to have the knowledge and the ability that I can be outside of the banking system for the most part and still be able to use things like Bitcoin just in regular day-to-day life so easily is just, it's so important to me. And so that's why I've been a huge supporter of Wirex. And I really recommend it to everyone. My wife has the card. I've got the card. All my employees have the card. I pay all my employees in Bitcoin. So I'm pretty much all Bitcoin based. And it's so much better. It's so much easier. It's so much cheaper, so much faster, and so much easier, so much better than dealing with the banks, especially with having employees or people I work with across the world. To do a wire transfer to someone working in Uruguay or Cambodia, which I have some people who work there. It's just that'd be just such a huge pain in the butt to do. Whereas with Bitcoin, it's beep, 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 and it's gone, and they've all got the Wirex card, so they're fine. And so yeah, to me, it's an extension of freedom to be able to have something like these cards.
Wow, that's very, very insightful. So in essence, it helps you continue your vigilantism or anarchism against the sort of banking system.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Bitcoin in general as a whole is just so empowering, and it just gives us an option outside of the modern day financial system, which is so controlled by the state and so controlled by the banks. It really gives the power back to the people.
Completely, I agree completely. And I mean, what do you think? So, do you think blockchain technology? I mean, it's pretty obvious. I think your answer. How do you think blockchain technology will do you think it will help anarchism, or the movement, or will it help it evolve into something new? Do you think?
Well, blockchain really is what it means is that we can have systems and data outside of the control of anyone. And that means that it's not centralized control, and in essence it means it's decentralized. So a thing like Bitcoin, it's really decentralized. There's no one who has control of it. And in essence, if you have your Bitcoin keys, your private key, you not only have your own money and you hold it, and no one else can steal it, as long as you don't lose your keys and your password and things like that. But you also are your own bank. So Bitcoin is not just a money; it's also a banking and transaction system, and that is so empowering and so important. And as you brought up earlier, the Federal Reserve and central banks basically run the world at this moment in time, hopefully for not much longer. And it was Ron Paul who said that it's no coincidence that the century of total war, which was the 20th century with World War I, World War II, all the wars, it's no coincidence that that was also the century of central banking, because you can't have these massive wars without the ability to inflate the currency to pay for it. Because people, you look at the U.S. today, they've been in Iraq for like 20 years, or Afghanistan for 20 years, Iraq for I think even more than 20 years if you include the first Gulf War. So if people were still getting a bill in the mail every month for their Iraq war, their Afghanistan war, even decades ago, they would have said, no, I don't want to pay for this. But that's the evilness of central banking, is you pay for it through the hidden tax of inflation. And it was Ford, the creator of the automobile in the early 20th century, said if people understood how the money system works, there'd be a revolution tomorrow. But that's the thing. They don't want anyone to know how the money system works. And that's why they'll never teach you that in your government schools, or indoctrination camps, as I call them. They will never teach you how money works, because if people really understood, they would get very angry, because they'd know they've been stolen from their entire lives and impoverished. And that's the entire goal, actually, of central banking. So to answer your question about how important are things like the blockchain to things like freedom, they're incredibly important, because it was actually Rothschild, the first person who came up with the scam of central banking, said centuries ago that I'm trying to remember the exact quote, but he said, I care not who controls makes the laws, I care who makes the money, and I make the money. And so essentially what he was saying was, if you control the money in a system like we have today with governments, you essentially control the governments. So if we can take that power away from them, it will get rid of not only central banks, but likely large-scale government in the size that we see today, where they're everywhere and they're doing everything, their welfare state, their warfare, their everything. They won't have the ability to do all that. So we might get rid of government completely, which would be optimal, but at the very least, it would reduce the size of government dramatically, which would do nothing but help in building prosperity again, because government does nothing but destroy prosperity, and central banking does the same. So if we can get rid of them both, and blockchain on its own has the potential to do that, we'll have peace and prosperity on earth like we've never known it. And if we don't get rid of governments and central banks, we could have tyranny like we've never known it either. So that's the stakes we're at today.
I completely agree, and it is really scary. You know, like you said, the century of central banking correlates with more wars than we've ever had in human history. And if you follow the paper trail and you see all the contracts and all of the things that happen behind closed door, all wars are sort of, at least the major ones are funded by the same sort of families, the same banks to some extent, and they choose the winners before the war's over.
They fund both sides. Yeah, there was one Marine or someone who I think is Smedley Butler, who was like one of the most decorated Marines or something along those lines, and afterwards he wrote a book called "War is a Racket." And he essentially said what it actually is, and it's just a big scam. It's a big way to steal money from a lot of people, big way to kill a lot of people, and it's all just to make money and for profit, and it has nothing to do with. And then, like we said, they fund both sides. Like, it's an absolute travesty, and these wars are never what you're told they're for. You look at, Afghanistan. They said that was for 9/11, but the same people who did 9/11 were the same people who said it was Afghanistan who did it. It wasn't, and Osama bin Laden and all that. All these things are based on lies, propaganda. You look at the Iraq War, say weapons of mass destruction, another lie. These are heinous war crimes that people like George Bush have done, and Barack Obama, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, didn't have one day of peace his entire presidency. He attacked under his regime Syria and Libya. It just never ends. And now you have Trump, and he's attacking Syria. Now he wants to attack. It just never ends. It is the military-industrial complex, and that's why it's so important that if we can get rid of central banking, they can't have these wars anymore. And So it's an incredibly important time in human history.
I completely agree, and I feel the same way. It feels almost like the U.S. and other states are almost doubling down. If they fail or the intervention doesn't get their goals, they pick two new targets. So now I think, like you're saying, is we've got building tension rising against North Korea, and they're not giving up as well on Syria. But I mean, this is kind of, getting the political point of view, and it's a bit upsetting, but I agree with the fact that this is a revolutionary period. We're going through a drastic change in sort of you change the money system, and the laws will follow. It's like what you quoted Lord Rothschild earlier, and I feel this is a very important time in human history. But the only problem that I currently see within sort of the Wirex community and with our community is that, only 7% or 8% of the community are female. And like with sort of half the world being a woman, how can we have a revolution without more women within the sphere? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And I mean, any ideas on potentially how we could change it, or?
Well, this might sound sexist to some people, but I believe it's just the honest truth about the way that men and women were created for whatever reason. It's my opinion that men are more built to take action, and women were built for whatever reason. And it's fine if they don't want to do that or whatever. But I think they were built to nurture, to foster, to raise children, to be loving, to create a nice environment for the family,
to spend money.
Well, that's all part of it as well, right? But I think that's generally our nature, and what they're trying to do with society today is trying to destroy that. It was actually the Rockefellers who started this whole feminist movement, and it was to get the women so-called into the workforce, which was to destroy the family, get the kids into the government indoctrination camps at 3 years old, where they can twist their minds and get them all doing their Pledge of Allegiance and all that kind of stuff. So this stuff all goes back for decades on how they've been trying to destroy this, and now they're trying to make men more into being like women more. This is all on purpose, and it's all to confuse people and to destroy families, because that makes them easier to control. If you don't have any sort of culture, any sort of semblance, and even look in Europe here, they're trying to bring in cause all these wars, to bring in all these immigrants to destroy the local culture, and so everything's just totally. It's just like there's no cohesiveness to anything, and that's their goal in order to try to control everybody. But to get back to your point, why aren't there more women in things like the liberty movement or things like Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin, that is money and banking and technology and math and stuff like that, which is more skewed towards what men are more interested in. It's more male dominated. Not to say women can't do it, but it's generally not something they're more interested in. So that's one reason. And then you look at the liberty movement, and again, men are more the types who go out and take action and try to change things. And women are more trying to create a good environment, a stable environment for the children, for the family. So you're not going to see tons of women going out, and you do see them every now and then. Of course, people like Ayn Rand, some amazing women have done those sort of things, but it's generally in the sphere of men. And what you'll find is, as these things grow and as they become more accepted socially, that the women will just generally gravitate more towards it, because once it's more accepted socially, they'll feel more comfortable, because again, I think their general nature is to create a stable environment. And so you're never going to see too many women coming out and trying to rock the boat and start a revolution and things like that. That's generally been, in the past and probably in the future, the sort of the sphere of men to do things like that. But so I don't worry too much about it, I think. And I am a part of the liberty movement, which is growing dramatically. And we're seeing a lot more women coming out and speaking out now and supporting it. So it is growing, and I think it will continue to grow.
Excellent. I mean, I see that point completely. And I mean, the point that you raised earlier with regards to there's like almost a switch. We're seeing a lot more sort of empowerment for females to take over sort of male-dominated areas within the media and so forth. And there's lots of movements sort of kind of supporting that, which is why, to some extent, I feel like we need to as well sort of include more women in the sphere, and try and help them get on board. But again, I do see your point. You know, this is very much sort of most of the revolutions in the past have been sort of male dominated, and you know, it's probably just a repeat of history with this one. And yeah, it will be very interesting to watch and see. Like, with regards to kind of banking and how they will take this change and what they will do within the scope, you know, do you think that, you know, they'll go down easily, or what sort of resistance do you think they'll throw up?
No, they will not go down easily. The people who control the banks and the central banks are some of the most evil people in the world. They'll start wars just for fun. They're that sort of nefarious and evil. So they're definitely not going to go down without a fight. I think up until the last year or two, they didn't realize what a huge problem Bitcoin is for them. Now they're starting to realize it, and what they still haven't realized it, but they're about to realize there's not a lot they can do about it unless they want to turn off the power in the internet. And you've heard them talking about it. They talk about the internet kill switch all the time. There was just a recent maybe terrorist attack in England. Who knows what it was? A lot of these are actually done by the CIA and Mossad and MI6. I don't know about the most recent one, but after the most recent one, Donald Trump came out immediately and said, we have to turn off the internet. It's like, and not a lot of people even said much about it.
You're absolutely right. Theresa May mirrored that exactly.
Yeah, she's been saying that for a while. So they're trying to get it out there that, yeah, if you want to be totally safe and secure, we're going to have to turn off the internet. Hopefully, I think people are I don't want to say they're too smart, because they're not too smart, but I think they've realized just, you know, these things bring a lot of great things into their life. And it also brings a lot of bad things, but also, you know, this has access to all the world's information, and you can access all your friends, everything on there. So I don't think they're going to be able to take it away from people very easily. And I certainly don't think that people will give it up very easily. So that's what they're trying to do, though, right now. So they're grasping at straws, trying to figure out how they're going to stop this. I think the next step will probably be, and I haven't said this publicly too much yet, but I think they're going to probably try to completely outlaw Bitcoin soon. And they've already, there's been small moves towards that in China, not completely to outlaw Bitcoin, but to outlaw Bitcoin exchanges. We could see that in places like the U.S. coming. I think once they realize what a problem it is, they'll try to stop it that way, which is making laws is just using violence. So they'll come in with their guns and say, if you use it, we'll kill you, or we'll put you in a cage. That's what government does. So that will be the next step, probably, and that'll be the most important step to get past for humanity. And hopefully a lot of people realize at that point, okay, these guys, this is not good. Why in the world would they want to stop this great new money that has so many benefits and so much value? But we'll see what happens. That's going to be it's an ongoing sort of war. It's an interesting war because there's like no shots fired. It's all information. It's information and mental and all that kind of stuff. It's really interesting. But it will be an ongoing war for the next few years. We'll see what happens.
No, I mean, I've witnessed that. Like, I do some charity work for some sort of kind of government organizations to help sort of, I provide insight and advice and so forth for free because I want to change the future. And from my experience, I've seen sort of two camps within government. There is the pro-banking camp, which are, you know, either funded by the banks or have been lobbied by the banks. And then there's another side of government that has some sort of libertarian ideals, and they're open to Bitcoin, and they actually support it. And they realize as well that the banks hold way too much control over government, and they want to distance themselves from that. There is even, you know, so this war even continues into the higher echelons within government, and it's a very interesting time. And but there is a very hardcore banking group, you know, with Jamie Dimon and so forth, that are looking to really sort of put the stranglehold on and get the big guns out, like you're talking about, and stop people from using it. And it is extremely worrying. I mean, but with regards to sort of the anarchist group and the crypto, the libertarian group, there is a little bit of a divide sort of between cryptocurrency enthusiasts and precious metals. I know you're in both, I'm in both as well, but I mean, you know, what do you think is the better investment? Would you say it would be cryptocurrencies, gold, and precious metals, or sort of stocks and shares?
I think the least viable in the next few years is the shares, the stocks. The only stocks that I recommend are gold mining stocks. But even those have a fair amount of risk, because if we have a complete and total financial and monetary collapse like I expect in the next few years, a lot of the things, the stock markets might just be gone completely for a while. So those have the most risk, but they also can do very well. So we are expecting gold mining stocks to go up hundreds, if not thousands of percent in the next year or two. But there's a lot of risk in those. So I definitely prefer, for safety reasons, gold, silver, and cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are fairly new, so it's, there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of risks that we still don't fully understand. It's still evolving, so
it's completely uncharted.
Yeah, completely uncharted. So to put most of your wealth into something so new, that'd be pretty radical, and that'd be pretty risk taking. But if you are a risk taker, you could totally do that and just see how it works out. I personally have most of my assets in gold and silver, somewhere along the lines of 60 to 70%, and then I have about 20 to 30% in cryptocurrencies. We recommended the dollar vigilante for your average person, and this would include like people's grandmas and stuff, to have 85% more into precious metals, 15% into cryptocurrencies. And again, you have to kind of learn about cryptocurrencies. It's not that easy to how to secure them and store them, and so it's not really for your grandma yet, but it will be in the coming years as the entrepreneurs develop things and stuff like that. But as far as what are the best things to be into, I would say just to diversify into all the different things. Have some hard assets outside of the financial system. I think the banking system will generally collapse in the next few years. I think the monetary system itself will collapse. We'll see the U.S. dollar just gone. We'll see the British pound gone. We'll see the Japanese yen gone, the euro gone, all over the next few years. And the elites kind of know this, and they've actually been planning to do it for quite a while, since the 80s, as far as I can tell. And they want to bring in a sort of a one world SDR currency, special drawing rights, sort of managed by the IMF and the Bank of International Settlements, which is sort of the central bank of central banks. And that is always their goal, is to have more and more centralized power, all the way down to the very top. And that's why if you look on the back of a $1 bill in the U.S., there's a pyramid with an all-seeing eye on there, and that's what they use as sort of their goal. They want the pyramid, that they want to be at the top of the pyramid, and they want to control everybody. Whereas people like myself, we want all the people at the bottom to have all the power, and no one can control them except for themselves, and anyone that they want to do deals with, all voluntarily they can, but to not have any sort of use of force to control people is the kind of world I'd like to see, and I can't believe more people don't want that. I would think everyone would want that, but people are, don't understand freedom all that much, because we haven't had any in our lifetimes, or in anyone's lifetimes, as far as I can tell. So it's sort of a new concept, as weird as that might sound. But as far as Bitcoin, gold, silver, I think they're all good, and that's what we talk about all the time at our newsletter, the Dollar Vigilante.
I agree completely. I realize we're really strapped for time. I agree completely. The only thing that I want to add is that I was in a very similar situation. I had 90% of my portfolio in gold and silver, and 10% in crypto years back now. But what happened is that the 10% is growing, and now it's 70%. And now the gold silver part of my portfolio is a smaller part, whereas it used to be the majority.
Yeah.
So that's what I found, and but it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you as well, Jeff. And it's been I'm starstruck almost. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope to follow you more, and may this be the first sort of conversation of many as well.
Cool. My pleasure.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.